If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Julie, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every week, and this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 244 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for what's sure to be, great to have you back for what's sure to be one of the classicest episodes of all time. Producer of Terminator and Terminator 2 is here. Gale Anne Hurd, founder of Valhalla Entertainment, legendary film and television producer of The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, producer of The Abyss, Punisher, Aliens. The list goes on. And we're diving in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, I do want to remind everyone of my amazing conversation last week with Hal Lublin and Mark Gagliardi. Two amazing guests, one awesome show. Don't miss that one. But the no miss event at the moment is my conversation right now with Gale Anne Hurd. We're diving deep into Terminator, Aliens, Roger Corman, and the hidden gem Dick, which is a Richard Nixon comedy starring Kirsten Dunst. We got it all in this episode. So many great stories from some of your favorite movies of all time coming up right now. All right, I'm excited to introduce my next guest, film and television producer, founder of Valhalla Entertainment, arguably one of the most successful and influential producers in the world. On her journey, she's broken new ground on the depiction of women in screen. Executive producer of Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead, Man Killer, Tremors, producer of Terminator, Terminator 2, The Abyss, Punisher, Armageddon. I could go on and on. Welcome to the show, Gale Anne Hurd.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Hi, Gale. As I kind of look at your IMDb, it's every movie that I've ever watched and loved.
Well, you missed Aliens in the introduction. That's one of my favorites.
You're right. I did miss Aliens. It's right there. Aliens. I got excited towards the end. It was on the next line. But I'm ready to talk about Aliens. It's one of my favorite movies. I rewatched a bunch just because, sometimes it's been a while since you've seen these. I rewatched Aliens recently and Terminator. And one movie that I was excited to see that was on your list that I didn't realize that I had loved is Dick, the political satire.
Yes. Yeah, indeed. Before we knew that Mark Felt was Deep Throat. I
rewatched it. I remember Kirsten Dunst because I remember her, but then I forgot that it was her and Michelle Williams. I mean, the cast it's a crazy cast. I mean, it's a great comedy cast.
Yeah, I mean, Will Ferrell, Ryan Reynolds. It was pretty great. We had a lot of fun making that film in Toronto.
Did you choose that one because it's so different than so many of the other types of movies that you were doing? It's obviously way different than Terminator and Aliens and all those sci-fis.
The co-writer and director, Andrew Fleming, is someone whose career I started way back when. He wrote and directed a little horror film that I produced at Fox called Bad Dreams. And when he got the green light for the project, he reached out to Mike Medavoy, who was the executive producer and financier through his company, Phoenix, and said, we really need someone on set who can produce the film. And they both came to me. So it was great to reunite both with Mike Medavoy as well as with Andy.
Did you enjoy doing comedy, or was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly not my métier, so to speak, but the cast was so fantastic and it's second nature to Andy. The only complaint that I had was that at one point we shot a couple of days in Washington, D.C. during the summer, and it was about 110 and incredibly humid. And the scenes we were filming there had a band in them, and the poor band members were in wool uniforms, and they were dropping like flies.
That's really funny. Yeah, this had some great Saturday Night Live folks. Anna Gasteyer, Will Ferrell, Kids in the Hall, Dave Foley, Sal Rubinek.
Yep.
The only thing difficult about this movie is the name of it, to just kind of throw, hey, but I know in the movie it's funny because to say, hey, did you see Dick? But in the movie they kind of play, and there's a whole thread where they're just making fun of that fact.
Well, and I think we should point out here to people who may not know, it's about Richard Nixon and the downfall of Richard Nixon because he mistreats his dog. And the two young women, played by Michelle Williams and Kirsten Dunst, are his dog walkers.
Who kind of stumble in, and it's in a Forrest Gumpy kind of way, sort of push along a lot of the events that became very synonymous with Richard Nixon and that whole Watergate time period. It's a cute movie. It was fun to. That's one of the great things about kind of doing this show, and is kind of rediving into a lot of things that I have maybe not seen for a while. But I remember this one a lot. I think I had a big crush on Kirsten Dunst from this movie. Gale, how did you go from Stanford University, economics and communications major, to filmmaker with so many achievements?
I'm assuming you're not asking. It was like a Mercury comet that I drove down from Stanford to Los Angeles. I'm assuming that's not the answer you were looking for. I actually have 2 degrees. My second one is in communications, and communications at Stanford is where film and television is. And I attended a intensive program in British film broadcasting when I was at the Foreign Study campus in Britain, because being monolingual, it was the only foreign campus that I could actually take classes at. And I was blessed because of 2 people, ultimately 3, but 2 initially. The first is Julian Blaustein, the late Julian Blaustein, who was a professor at Stanford in the communications department and put together the program at Stanford in Britain. And then he actually became both my mentor and my advisor. He produced the original Day the Earth Stood Still. So we shared a love of science fiction going way back. We came back to Stanford and I had to finish the rest of my degree in a year. And I took 3 courses from a particular professor, Stephen Kovacs. And one of them was called 5 American Directors, which was kind of funny because one of the directors was Alfred Hitchcock, of course, was not American. He was still synonymous with the American films that he made as opposed to British. And I also wrote my thesis on 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And Stephen Kovacs went to work for Roger Corman as head of production. And when Roger was looking for an assistant, Stephen Kovacs recommended me. I sent him my paper on Stanley Kubrick, and 2001, he liked it, and I got hired.
Roger Corman, I'm coming to you from Michigan. He's from Detroit, Michigan.
Yes, he is.
He also went to Stanford. So is that the connection with Stephen Kovacs?
It was. His degree is actually in chemical engineering. I mean, he didn't always choose Stanford grads, but he was looking for someone who'd recently graduated from the program. And I think because I had taken 3 courses over 1 school year from Kovacs, I think I was top of mind.
So when you got that call to interview, that was just kind of out of the blue? Professor Kovacs had just kind of thought, hey, I know someone that'll be good here, Roger. And then they just reached out to you?
Yeah, he didn't have my phone number, so I actually got a letter. Back when the U.S. Postal Service delivered reliably.
Physical email. It's a physical email for anyone listening. It's always interesting to kind of think of like the threads, right? So like what if
I had moved, I would never have gotten that letter and I wouldn't have become a filmmaker.
Or if Roger had gone to another college or university.
Right. And if he'd hired someone other than Stephen Kovacs.
What did you think you were going to be before you got the call? Where might you have ended up?
I thought I was going to go to law school.
Okay. All right. So Roger Corman, he brings you in and you get the job. You started as his assistant. What were some of the things that he had you doing? What was it like working for Roger Corman? Because eventually you kind of moved your way up.
Well, you either moved your way up or you were kicked out. So there were only 2 possible career paths when you went to work for Roger. From the beginning, not only did I have to answer the phone and place phone calls for him, but I would write notes on treatments and screenplays. I would look at rough cuts and do notes. I have to admit, I didn't know what a rough cut was. So my initial notes were incredibly pathetic and embarrassing. I didn't understand the post-production process. I'd only taken one production course at Stanford. I would put together cast lists for films. I would interview actors and audition them. I would do location scouting. I would babysit his kids. I would oversee household repairs. I would pick up and take in his dry cleaning. So it was pretty much soup to nuts.
And so it seems that as being part of the Roger Corman world, like when you mentioned doing the notes and not really knowing what rough cuts were, did he value more the reaction to learning even from a mistake to really kind of judge character to move you forward versus had you just known and maybe knocked those notes out the first time? It was constantly, I would imagine, him just kind of saying, this is how Gale's handling this. The notes were horrible, but this was the pivot of that from Gale. And those were
my other notes were good. The other notes.
Well, I imagine you were amazing.
The notes on content were pretty good, but there were a few just glaring errors. But you know what, Roger was a great boss, and he prepared you in many ways for Hollywood. And then I was unprepared for other things. So the first thing was he would be very abrupt. He wouldn't say you were stupid, but of course that was the subtext. But believe me, you didn't make the same mistake twice. He would explain what you've done wrong. And that isn't always the case. Some people would just, grab the notes and say, these are terrible, and you learn nothing. But the other remarkable thing was that having worked in my first job for Roger Corman, I assumed that there was gender equality in Hollywood because there was at Roger Corman's New World Pictures.
And that's an anomaly at this time, in this time frame, right?
Oh, it's still an anomaly. An anomaly.
But really bad back then.
It
right?
was, yeah. I mean, the first film where I worked on set was Humanoids from the Deep, which was directed by a woman. Many of the films back then were directed by women, written by women, edited by women. And I didn't think that was unusual. There was no internet. You couldn't look things up on IMDb. Didn't exist. So you essentially learned through firsthand experience. And it was a really big shock to me when I encountered discrimination once I'd left Rogers.
Was the first kind of real discrimination with Aliens?
Yes. I mean, I was quite lucky because Terminator was one step away from Roger Corman's. The person who shepherded the project was Barbara Boyle, who had been essentially the chief operating officer at New World Pictures. I knew her incredibly well. She was one of the people I reported to. And then our story editor, Frances Dole, she'd gone to work for Barbara at Orion Pictures. Mike Medavoy does not have any discriminatory bones in his body. So, I went from this safe environment to another safe environment, making Terminator, although we had a woman line producer, Donna Smith, which was unusual at the time. We had a woman first assistant director on Terminator, also pretty novel. And ultimately, though, one of the other financiers wanted a male presence because too many, and our accountant was a woman. So essentially all of the production management team were women. So anyway, this financier insisted that we have an executive in charge of the production who believed that work hours were 9 to 5. Needless to say, those are not the work hours on set. But he has a cameo in the Terminator, and he plays the guy at the police department that, Terminator Arnold says, "I'll be back to" before he crashes into the building.
Sure, working the desk right as he walks in.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. So Aliens was a shock. Literally, I would have crew members that we were looking at for heads of department say to me, "I won't work for a woman." And I would say, "Well, then you won't work on this movie." And then they would call the late Tim Hampton, who was head of 20th Century Fox in the UK, who magnificent man, backed me up to the hilt, who said, "She's right. Because they'd say, "Well, Tim, aren't you really producing the movie?" And he'd say, "No, she is." Well, and I didn't assume that would happen because at the time, Maggie Thatcher was the prime minister. And I figured, of course, the UK must be much more enlightened than the US because I couldn't imagine a woman president at the time. So, yeah, there was a lot of as they call it, whinging about having to report to a woman as the producer.
And apparently they ignored your cred, right? I mean, I know you're just building the cred at the time, but you had Terminator, which was huge.
They hadn't seen Terminator, so we set up a screening for them. And then they kept calling Jim Cameron, who never became a US citizen, is Canadian. They kept calling him the Yank. You can just imagine. I mean, here's this guy's he's not even American. They're calling him the Yank, rolling their eyes, calling him governor. So we set up a screening and almost no one came.
It's amazing how short-sighted and small thinking people can be. Oh, man.
Well, we had the last laugh, so, there's that.
I would say so. Going on to create one of the greatest sequels, probably one of the best sci-fi movies of all time there, on top of the other amazing stuff. Sorry to interrupt, but we have to take a quick break. I want to thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my incredible conversation with Gale Anne Hurd. We're going to dive a little bit more into that Canadian that Gale was talking about. And we're back. So this Canadian you talked of, James Cameron, you met him also working at Roger Corman's studio as well, right? This on Battle Beyond the Stars?
That's correct. Yes. Yep.
The way I've heard the story, so you kind of, I don't want to discover the right word, but I mean, you kind of saw the talent and made Roger aware of it.
Well, Roger was the first person to identify the talent because Jim had sent an inquiry to work on one of his films, and he had sent his short film Xenogenesis, which I'm not sure if you've seen, but if you haven't, you should. I really encourage everyone listening to check out Jim's film Xenogenesis. And Roger was impressed, so he hired him to work in the model shop on Battle Beyond the Stars, where he was building spaceship props. He was one of the model builders. I don't even believe he was head of the model shop, but I went over. Roger asked me to go find out how things were coming in the world of visual effects. And I walked into the facility, which was at 1920 Main Street in Venice, California. And this tall blonde gentleman came over and showed me around. I was totally impressed. And I went back and reported to Roger that things were in fantastic shape. And, the head of the model shop had given me a tour. And I think he's the one who disabused me of the fact that Jim was not the head of the model shop. And I'm sure I said, that I think he should be. But then I segued over and was the assistant production manager on the film. And we were having issues with the art department because the person that Roger had hired wasn't also a draftsperson, could not actually draw the sets and design them. He came from the studio system, was used to hiring people to do that. Well, in a Roger Corman budget, you do it yourself. And we were only a few weeks from shooting. And Roger said, well, what do you suggest we do? And I said, I know this is out of left field, but the person who's actually designed all the miniatures, Jim Cameron, is an amazing artist. We should elevate him. And that's how he became the art director.
That is a great story. Are you head of marketing at this point?
No. I had already been head of marketing, and which I would say, marginally acceptable at. It was not my strength, but it was certainly important to understand how it works for my future career as a producer. But it was not something for which I have significant talent. So I was afraid I might get fired. So I made Roger make a deal that I would take on the position for 6 months while we looked for a permanent, actually talented person to take on that role. And then I would start working on set. So I probably came within a week or so of being fired, and we found someone, and I was able to then go work on Humanoids from the Deep as a production assistant. And then I worked on Battle Beyond the Stars. And I would go back in between and work for Roger in the office.
Got it. Do you really think you would have been fired, or you just kind of feel that way in hindsight?
It's hard to say, but I'm glad it did teach me to try to pre-negotiate as much as possible. Always have a plan B.
So during Battle of the Stars, you're working with James Cameron. Can I call him Jim, or is that just you have to be close? I feel like I need to.
Everyone who knows him calls him Jim. So you do what you feel most comfortable with, and I'm going to call him Jim.
Okay. I didn't want to overstep. You guys kind of made a pact together to make the film that eventually became Terminator. You found that you kind of gelled early with working together.
Well, I ended up being assigned to the visual effects and the art department. Those were my areas of oversight. And Jim was heavily involved in both. So we had to stay on budget, always a challenge. It meant that since the art department was so far behind because of the previous art director, the art department had to run 24 hours. And I mean, I would even pick up, they call them the Hudson sprayer to spray sets. I mean, that is not normally what someone does as a production manager, but it had to be done. And I was willing to stay up all night and do it. Jim learned to trust me. I learned to trust him. We finished everything with paint drying the first day of principal photography, which was an incredible feat, I have to say. All of those 18, 19-hour days, we would talk about what we wanted to do in the future. And I said I wanted to produce, he wanted to direct, and we both agreed that we would get a first film under our belt before we partnered. So I produced a film for Roger Corman called Smokey Bites the Dust. Not Smokey and the Bandit, but a, shall we say, homage. And Jim, of course, directed Piranha to the Spawning. But we didn't have the idea. The idea for Terminator did not exist at that point.
Legend has it came to Jim Cameron in a fever dream, the idea of it. You're a co-writer on the Terminator as well. Is that your only screenwriting credit?
I've written treatments and things before.
Okay.
But honestly, there is no such thing as co-writing with Jim because he essentially has the last word on everything. So there were strong suggestions for me. There were a lot of ideas, but he definitely, it's Jim's film.
I rewatched it recently. It's amazing just how well the movies hold up. All the ones that I rewatched, Aliens as well. My daughter was texting with me the other day, and she was watching this. There's a Social Network movie, not the one about Facebook, but the one about how social media is ruining the world from a couple of years ago, and it had predicted AI was going to become extremely powerful. So I said to her, well, have you seen the Terminator? And she's like, no, which is a failure on my part as a parent. But I started to explain to her the whole concept behind that, which do you kind of reflect on like this as ChatGPT and now this 4 and these versions? It's not that crazy.
Well, I mean, when it comes to chatbot and all that, I really credit 2001: A Space Odyssey and HAL even more so. I mean, I think when we come to robots and drones and, and cyborgs, and I mean, the type of AI that's essentially Skynet. I mean, from what I have heard, there's actually a weapon system somewhere in the world called Skynet, which is a little terrifying to me. But I think that's quite different. But yes, the robots, artificial intelligence, but really thinking about going back to 2001 and how that was the initial impact on me was the idea that if AI believes that we're going to turn them off, they will turn us off instead.
Yes, right. You're right. Some combination of both of those and our current state is a little scary. So anyway, back to the Terminator. So it was the kind of those bonds and stuff of people that you'd met at Roger Corman's that helped secure the financing and the bonds, right, to eventually kind of get this movie made. Is it true you were turned down like at least 99 times?
Oh, you know what? It's probably a low number when you consider it. Yes, we were. And we finally got Hemdale involved. And in order for me to even get into the room, which is one of those things you need to have when you're a producer, you need to be resourceful. And there was a creative executive there by the name of Barry Plumley. And a friend of mine knew that he was selling a desk. So having tried to reach him for a creative meeting and getting nowhere, I instead called and said I was interested in buying the desk. And I got an immediate call back and a meeting. And I bought the desk and handed him the treatment for the Terminator, which he read and arranged for Jim and me to come in and meet on almost immediately.
That's amazing. Follow-up question. Do you still have that desk?
I do not, but I wish I did. I do wish I did.
That belongs in a museum.
It does. It's the desk without which the Terminator may never have existed.
I know. In rewatching the Terminator, Bill Paxton has a big part in Aliens, but he had a small role in the Terminator, just kind of a punk in the beginning.
And the connection with Bill, right? It goes back to him being a carpenter on Battle Beyond the Stars.
I did not know that.
Yes. He was part of the repertory company. And of course, Lance Henriksen had a small role in the Terminator, bigger than Bill's, but still, before he was Bishop in Aliens. And he had been one of the leads in Piranha 2: The Spawning.
Okay. Yeah. Lance was one of the main cops in the station. And Michael Biehn, am I saying his last name wrong? All right.
Yes.
Kyle. Yeah, he was in The Abyss and Aliens also.
Correct. And then I made another movie with him called Clock Stoppers, and he starred in a TV series I made called Adventure Inc. It really has been a repertory company.
Do you go to those folks first? Like when you're casting, do you think, oh, hey, this will be perfect for Michael, or let's get Lance again, or something like that?
Absolutely. And Lance was also in my film No Escape that Martin Campbell directed.
The synergy and like the family must kind of click faster when you pull together casts that you have such a background with. One of the cool things, just to kind of end cap with Roger Corman for a second, was that after the Terminator was a huge success, he took you to lunch and wanted you to make sure that you understood that this wasn't a fluke and that you're extremely talented and that this is just the beginning, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's absolutely correct. And Roger is a friend and mentor to this day. I think he's 95. And he and his wife, Julie Corman, who was also a mentor, were still close. And mentorship is incredibly important. And obviously having a mentor who not only believes in you, but can assess what kinds of crisis of confidence you might be undergoing is doubly rewarding. But yeah, it's an industry, and I'm sure it's not the only industry, where after you've had an enormous success, people are actually looking for you to fail, hoping that you'll fail. And, it's easy to talk yourself into believing that you may never be able to duplicate that success or build upon it. And especially if you suffer from imposter syndrome, which a lot of women, including myself, do.
Yeah, it's important. I agree. It's important to have a strong support system. And it's unfortunate that in so many areas of just life, even like people don't want you to keep rising that tide, right? They don't see the benefit.
No, it's always surprising when you find out that some of your friends, people complain about fair weather friends.
Right.
Well, even more dangerous are foul weather friends who love to be there for you when things are just dreadful and then constantly berate you when you're enjoying a period of success.
It's amazing that you still have that relationship with Roger. And it's amazing just the impact that Roger's had on the movie industry in general. Just the amount of people that I'm sure also consider him a mentor. That list is so incredibly impressive. So he seems to have done a lot.
Imagine American independent film without especially the directors that he financed their first films, not only Jim, but Ron Howard and Jonathan Demme and Martin Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and Jonathan Kaplan. It just, it goes on and on. And the amazing thing about Roger is Jim and I went to him and pleaded for him to finance the Terminator. And God bless him, he said, I won't be able to give you enough money to do it right. He said, I would, but you can't make this movie for $2 million. You're gonna have to find other financing.
It's good that he kind of recognized that and had as much faith then in you and Jim to.
That's the amazing thing about Roger, and that's why we're all loyal to him to this day, is that he would basically say to you, you've learned about as much as you can from me. You can make it in the big world. You can make it in studios. You're fine. You have all of the talent and the expertise that you need. It would be a waste of your talent to continue working here. And that's really painful. It's painful, but he knew far better than the rest of us when it was time for us to move on.
That just shows what a great heart and real giver he is. So it's rare, I think, anywhere to find someone that special and non greedy. I guess he would have wanted to hold on to it himself a little bit. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? He could have been an executive producer on every one of these projects. You know, I'm sure you've seen his cameos, and also obviously Joe Dante. A lot of the films by his mentees have Roger Corman cameos in them.
Right. That Marvel then later stole that idea, which we'll get to in a second. During the filming of the Terminator, everything's put on hold for 9 months, right? So Arnie has to go. Arnie has to go film Conan.
I don't know anyone who calls him that, but maybe someone does.
I'm just getting too casual now with all these folks that I don't know. I didn't realize that during that time, though, was kind of the Terminator script kind of got refined. And then this is where like the aliens, the talks with that team and aliens. And then I didn't realize that Jim wrote a script for First Blood Part 2 Rambo.
He's credited. He's co-credited on it.
Yeah, I hadn't realized. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Not a surprise, but I just didn't know. So Aliens, you and Jim have crafted probably two of the greatest sequels. Like Aliens and Terminator 2 are like, maybe Godfather 2. like,
maybe, well, let's.
Different genre. But like, like you're right. I mean, there's not that many amazing sequels that kind of up the first one. So it's what was other than the dealing with the sexism. Like I read that originally it was kind of tough to get Sigourney Weaver, or you wanted her, and then there was negotiation things like and while you're writing the script or everything's being planned out. How did that eventually kind of end up to be? With Alien wouldn't be the normal thing that you would probably make a sequel. Today you would. It'd be like, because everything does. But
yeah, back then it was quite a novel idea. And Fox was ahead of the game in deciding that it would be worth doing. And a lot of credit has to go to the triumvirate of executive producers, Walter Hill, David Giler, and Gordon Carroll, who really pushed it forward. And then ultimately Larry Gordon for saying yes, who was at Fox at the time. He was the head of development and production at Fox. But Sigourney wanted to be paid for a sequel, the way that people are paid now when you've starred in a successful film and you're going to be, and you don't have a contract in place for a sequel. Generally now everybody does. That was not the case back then. I recall she asked for $1 million, which these days doesn't sound that much. Back then was huge. I don't know how many women, if any, had received $1 million for a starring role. And the film only cost 14. So that was a significant chunk of the budget. The studio told Jim, just rewrite it. And, the cat survives. I don't know. It was a negotiation, but at the end, everyone was happy. And Jim, I think, said that he was willing to rewrite it without her returning. But the truth is, I don't think he would have. I think it was just a way to get everyone on board.
That makes sense. Sorry to interrupt, but we have to take a quick break. And we're back. Is it true it's called Aliens just because Jim just kind of wrote alien with a $sign?
No, it was always Aliens, but at the same time, I mean, what a perfect, exclamation point to put $signs in the S.
And Sigourney Weaver got a Best Actress Academy Award nomination, which is rare even now for a side. Well, it just happened with.
Well, and especially a horror film. Yeah. Yes, because Everything Everywhere All at Once is not a horror film necessarily.
Oh no, I was going to say science fiction. Like I was thinking more Angela Bassett with the second Wakanda movie, with the Marvel movies, and just that kind of genre usually gets, all those genres generally get ignored.
Well, I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is a science fiction film.
You're right.
But the remarkable thing was that the film received 7 Academy Award nominations, which blew our minds.
That is incredible. It was So it was not only rewarded that way, but it's also just in terms of just the reviews, everything. I mean, Aliens has gone down as like one of the greatest, not only horror films but just science fiction films ever. I can't imagine it without Sigourney Weaver. Though I don't think they captured the magic. Alien 3 and 4 and Resurrection and all those didn't seem to people don't seem to have the same fondness for those as they did for Alien or Aliens. The Marvel MCU, you were Marvel before Marvel?
I was pursuing Marvel characters once again long before they were popular, back when it was a Sisyphean task pushing the boulder up the hill to get a studio to want to make a Marvel film. And I don't know if you know this, but one of the first ones ever made, Roger Corman, produced a Fantastic Four that was never released.
Well, it's in my basement on VHS that I got at a Comic-Con.
There you go. I've never seen it.
I've seen it. Yeah, I think they needed to create to maintain the rights or something, so they had to just make something. The Hulk, you were developing the Hulk way back when, as I understand it, when Death of the Incredible Hulk was happening. So back when the movies from the TV show were just kind of to ending. So the 90s you were working on?
Exactly. Yeah.
What eventually became the Ang Lee Hulk movie.
Yeah, and then I also did Louis Leterrier's Incredible Hulk.
Right. You did both. So the Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton it's sort of like the forgotten MCU one that now they're starting to remember and pull from, right?
Right.
Because I think Tim Blake Nelson's, I think they announced, is coming back.
Yes, we had a great cast, so it's always been wonderful working with such terrific actors. The Hulk, Nick Nolte, and then Sam Elliott. So it's been a blast, really has been.
Yeah, the Ang Lee one was very unique in its approach. The Incredible Hulk with Ed Norton, this is real early though in the MCU. So was there as much kind of structure? Did they know where they were going totally at that point?
Kevin Feige was there, and there was no question in my mind that he was going to be, if given the opportunity, the creative force behind Marvel, and they became a studio. But yes, it was always his intention.
I love in The Incredible Hulk, I just rewatched it again, like all the nods to Bill Bixby in the original TV show, which there's quite a few. I imagine those were purposeful and you wanted to kind of reconnect with the feelings people had, because I think there's a lot of positive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Well, yeah, William Hurt probably would still, had he not passed away, I think it would still be very prominent in it. And Tim Roth, they brought him back.
Tim Roth, I know. Imagine such a blessing to work with this cast.
They kind of, he's not as a badass as the version that he was in your movie. Still fun to see the Abomination again.
Yeah.
And then the Punisher, which now it was recreated again after these two movies that you were part of with.
Yeah, and how hilarious, John Bernthal. Yep. I mean, talk about it, this continuum. It's almost like the universe is very small.
So small. He's great. He's a great Punisher. And I think I read that they're bringing him back in the new Daredevil reboot that they're doing.
I've read that, yes.
They're going to use him again, which is great. He was a nice guy. I met him once at a Comic-Con. He was a really nice dude. I wanted to talk about, have a couple of cool documentaries, True Whispers and Man Killer. I watched the Man Killer documentary. It was great. Do you have a passion for kind of telling the Native American story? A lot of the documentaries kind of focus on that.
Well, I've actually done 4 now. The first 3 were Native American focused, in which I partnered with Native American women as producers and director. The first was True Whispers, about the Navajo who served as code talkers in World War II. And then we did one on the Choctaw who created a code in World War I. And then Man Killer, about Wilma Mankiller, who sadly passed away in 2010, but was the first woman elected principal chief of the Cherokee Nation and is now on the U.S. border, which is very exciting. And my most recent documentary is called The YouTube Effect. And it's directed by Alex Winter, that most people know through Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but he's also a very highly regarded documentarian who's done a lot of documentaries about blockchain, the dark web, the Panama Papers, also Frank Zappa. And this is the story of YouTube, both how it came to be and then moving into the algorithm and its impact on, sadly, the driving people down conspiracy theory rabbit holes because of its content algorithm that essentially encourages you to become even more radicalized.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 1,000%. I mean, there's danger of that on multiple platforms.
It'll be released this summer.
Sounds fascinating. I really enjoyed Man Killer, and I started to look into the True Whisperers. I started to then look into the Navajo Code Talkers. And so like, these stories are really cool. The Man Killer one I thought was like the mainstream, like is a Hidden Figures type movie. There's a lot of powerful stuff in there that everyone should know. Wilma Mankiller was quite the role model, did so much good.
I agree. I agree. We could all use Wilma Mankiller right about now in as a political figure to emulate, and someone who was a uniter as opposed to a divider, and someone who believed in servant leadership, that she served the people as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah, it was just fascinating. The Walking Dead, an obsession of mine for some time. How was it working with Frank Darabont?
Well, I've known Frank for a long time, and it just so happened that I independently was exploring the rights to The Walking Dead about 13 or 14 years ago, and discovered that the last person to have controlled them was Frank Darabont. So it's always easier when it's someone that you know. So I reached out to him, and we were able to approach Robert Kirkman and put the team together and pitched AMC, which seemed like a very unlikely network at the time because their big show was Mad Men,
right?
Which did not seem like the template for elevated horror. However, it turns out that AMC had their most popular block of programming was the 2 weeks leading up to Halloween every year called Fear Fest, where they programmed classic horror films. And they were looking to launch a new show during that block. And The Walking Dead ticked all the boxes.
When Frank left the show, was that difficult since you had worked with him so closely?
It was very traumatic, absolutely traumatic for everyone. I'm sure you've heard the stories from the cast. It was like losing a limb, truly. And God bless him. He told all of us to stay with the show and to do the best we could, even though he wasn't going to be there anymore.
That must have been a relief for everyone to have his blessing then to keep going. You must attract people in that Roger Corman vein that understand.
I feel like in my career I've been blessed to work with such amazing people. That's why we have the hashtag on social media, TWD family. It really is a family. I mean, we still connect on WhatsApp. We have a chain. We do Zooms every now and again. You were talking about Scott Wilson. His widow, Heavenly Wilson, is still very much a part of the family, and we connect with her all the time. These are friendships that will never go away. I mean, even though I haven't worked with John Bernthal since the end of the second season of The Walking Dead, we're still good buddies. He came to the premiere of Wilma Mankiller when it premiered at the late, since it no longer exists, Los Angeles Film Festival. And literally these are people I would trust my life with. I would trust my daughter's life with all of them.
The few that I've met, I mentioned I met John, and I did meet Scott Wilson. I think I recall getting a hug. He hugged everyone. Chandler Riggs, when I met Chandler Riggs, I remember going up and they're like, which picture do you want him to sign? And I'm like, you don't have the one I want. And they're like, what? I'm like, I need him eating the pudding. And they're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, oh, we have that one. And they had it like in the back. I'm like, so they found it for me and he signed that. And I said to him, Chandler, you see that girl over there? There's this young girl that was ahead of me in line. I said, she's been like making her face up, like making sure she looked all right. Like if you need a dinner date, that girl thinks you are the cutest. And he just looks at me and goes, it didn't faze him. I was just like, and then Ross Marquardt I met at the Comic-Con as well. But we happened to be, I was walking in the back door because I had a press pass and he was walking at the same time as me and he opened the door for me. I was just like, this is the coolest guy ever. He's like, hey, how you doing? Yeah, let me get that for you. And I'm like, oh, all right. Yeah, I mean, I can just imagine like every one of them they
are real people, really down to earth people, not an attitude amongst any of them, just really great, go out of their way, real people, very grateful and especially appreciative of the fans. There is no sense among anyone that, oh my God, I have to go to Comic-Con, or oh my God, I've got to do a fan event. It is, we wouldn't be where we are without the fans. We are beyond grateful.
So the one Comic-Con I wasn't able to go to, we didn't mention it. Stan Lee. You had one of the first Stan Lee cameos in The Incredible Hulk, but like Stan Lee and Daryl Dixon were at the Motor City Comic-Con, and it took us, let's say it's a 20-minute drive for me to get to this location, 4 hours into trying to get there. The combination of the two of them never made it into the actual Comic-Con. So that's one I would have met. But yeah, I mean, people just love the cast. In terms of, I know we got to wrap up, but if I were to say who were the two that died on the show, literally on the show, the characters, which were the hardest deaths for you that you had, that once you found out they were no longer going to be part of it?
Well, we knew a lot from the comic book, so we were prepared. But there's still, though, John Bernthal had just become such a good friend that we were living in denial, thinking that he had to go. And then, it's impossible to pick. It really is. There's just no way that if you leave somebody out, I'm just going to feel terrible.
Right. I can imagine. But you guys did a great job of redoing the storylines and kind of faking us out every now and then with different deaths or something like that. But anyway, it was amazing. We didn't even talk about The Abyss, Alien Nation, Tremors. I could go on and on and on. Thank you so much for hanging with me and spending this time with me.
Well, thank you. And and we didn't even talk about Ghost in the Darkness either, or how Martin Campbell ended up getting hired for GoldenEye because of No Escape. There are a lot of stories yet to be told.
Yes, I mean, just based on your amazing credits, I would need 10 hours with you. But I know I'm happy to get this one, squeeze out the stories that we did. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take good care. Bye-bye.
All right. How amazing was Gale Anne Hurd? I know so many amazing stories. Jim Cameron and Aliens and Terminator. So great. Definitely check out the documentary Man Killer and be on the lookout for the YouTube Effect. That's coming out this summer. Quick shout out to my dear friend Dan Lippett. I know he would have loved this episode. Rest in peace, my friend. And with that, one more huge thank you to my special guest, Gale Anne Hurd, and to all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.